So, guys, welcome. This is the MULTIVAC's podcast, the second edition of MULTIVAC's podcast. So, if you are new, welcome. If you're listening to the first one, thank you very much you must have enjoyed it somehow and decided to listen to the second one. So, that's awesome. Today, we're going to talk about sustainability goes beyond just the packaging. So, we talked last time a lot about the plastics and the packaging, but as a business, we do we've discovered and looked at a lot more that goes beyond just the packaging. So I've got some friends and some colleagues with me today. I'll introduce them in a minute. I'm your host. I'm Elliot Chrisp. I lead the sort of a group of sustainable consultants at MULTIVAC with the materials team, and then we've got Karl.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Karl Jones, and I work in the product management team at MULTIVAC. Currently looking after vacuum chamber machines, but making a move into processing.
My name's Clive Amos. I look after material supply into the southwest and other parts of the country, and as Elliot's already mentioned, with a heavy skew towards recyclability and sustainability.
And my name's Doug Keith, and I'm Regional Sales Manager for the South East, looking after machinery sales.
Brilliant. So Doug sells the metal.
I do. Clive sells the plastic. I'm sorry we brought Clive back. No one else would do this, so we decided Clive could come back and join us. Yeah.
I'm a prisoner.
So, also, big news, it is Recycling Week. So it's National Recycling Week. So as a business, we are part of RAP and the UK Plastics Pact. So this week is all about recycling, big media push for recycling and getting that done at home. So that's really good that we do a podcast today and talk a little bit about recycling and the importance and where MULTIVAC sort of sits in it. But we're going to get into some questions, I think, and kick off with the questions. So these are news articles that we've sort of picked up, and some people have asked questions as well, customers. So if you do want to ask a question, please send it in to us, because it's really important that you engage with the podcast, because we're doing this so we're picking subjects up that we think are interesting to you and just having a coffee and having a chat about them. So if there's something of interest to you, then please do shout up. So the first one is an article that comes from Doug. Now, Doug sent me an article that was about worms eating plastic.
You're going to love this, by the way.
And I thought it was really interesting. So Doug loves a good article. He sits down with coffee in the morning and obviously
nothing better. Yeah.
Googles about worms. So if you haven't seen this, this is an article about how worms or scientists are developing and discovered that worm saliva potentially can break down plastic in landfill. So we're going to talk about it a little bit. If you haven't seen the article, I think it's on The Guardian and another couple of publications.
Definitely on the BBC as well. BBC, yeah.
So the question is worms the answer? So to sort of break that down, is worms the answer to all of our recycling problems? And that's a big complex question, but we're gonna get into it a little bit. I'm gonna ask Clive his opinion on this worms, because as a team, as a materials team, we often get asked about, is it recyclable? And the old age adage would be it's energy recoverable, wouldn't it?
Yep.
And now is it curbside? Is it supermarket collection? There's loads of different collection points, and that's all been driven out of need. So we don't have all of our materials in the UK are recyclable. We picked up on that on the first episode, and I really encourage you to go and have a little listen to that if possible. Yeah, Clive, opinion about worms bridging the gap on recycling.
The first thing that pops into my head is that of animal cruelty, which I think will be the end story when these huge monster worms come into the system.
They're worried about microplastics in fish, and now there's going to be microplastics in worms.
Exactly that.
But you never know, they might be able to process. I don't think they actually eat it. I think it's their saliva. They sort of move over it. They maybe, I don't know, mouth the plastic.
So it's an excretion rather than...
I don't think they consume it.
Right.
But when I saw it, I thought, as I said, followed it across to Elliot, thought it was quite an interesting concept. And, if it works, it could be the thing that saves the planet a little bit more. It makes plastics a little bit greener, shall we say, than some of them are. And who knows?
If it's going into landfill, though, and these worms operate in a landfill site, surely that's going to make the land unstable.
This is classic Clive, by the way. He loves the semantics about the bigger picture, which is great.
As Elliot has mentioned before, I resemble Karl Pilkington to some degree, so I'm told. So I'm kind of taking that sort of mental approach to the whole process.
How many worms would you need? You
That's
need
a
lot
good
of
question.
It's a
That's a good
great
question.
question,
worms.
Karl.
How much plastic
Karl,
can
yeah.
one worm eat?
Only one, because it ends up being huge.
Oh, it becomes a mega worm, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
This is people tuning in now. What are they talking about? Just worms for?
Yeah.
But the importance of this really is about, you have mechanical recycling for easy stuff on curbside, right? You have potentially chemical recycling on all the plastics and different laminates that you can't make into a mono or make into easily recyclable. But you also have the problem that no matter what you put in place, a consumer or citizen isn't always going to get it right. And it's not right to ask the citizen to always get it right, because there needs to be situations where we can get it wrong and it still be broken down or recycled or whatever. So this is just another one from my point of view and my perspective of someone thinking outside the box and finding maybe a new solution to a bigger problem. Whether it's scalable, Karl, on how many worms you need in a landfill, or will the worms escape the landfill? These are loads of questions that I've got.
At least someone's looking at another solution
That's
other
right,
than recycling. I mean, I went to a plant-based summit on Friday in London, and there was several of the large supermarkets were there, and their statements were, we're not getting away from plastic. They understand they need plastic.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get food wastage, and food wastage is so much worse for the environment than using plastic. So there's always going to be plastic. So whether you recycle that plastic, that plastic will always end in landfill. There will be the people that do care, and they will look after, and they will recycle. There will be people that don't care, and they will put it into their bins. So if these worms are a solution, who knows? It might be just a news story. It might work, it might not. If it does, it could be a good thing. Who knows?
I think it could be a great thing just to bridge that gap. And I think as an industry, we really need that. We need all the help we can get to create a fully closed loop recycling system that captures everything. So I think it's brilliant.
David Attenborough is going to be livid.
Oh no.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
All right. So next question. And this is one about EPR. So EPR is a relevant subject in the packaging industry at the moment. This is ever-changing scenario. So we've got a question about it. So it is, will process packaging be included in EPR?
Elliot, can you just clarify what EPR is for me?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to give this one to Clive, because Clive loves talking about EPR.
Thanks very much. So EPR basically is extended producer responsibility. And what it replaces is PRNs, another pseudonym, which is packaging recovery notes. Essentially, each processor will pay for a certain number of packaging recovery notes every year, which covers the cost of their waste and then recycling for that product. The principal theory is that the PRN money, and what EPR will be as well, is to pay for the infrastructure to support that.
Okay.
Cynic in me would suggest that money doesn't all go in that direction.
Sure.
But that's what it's meant. That's what it's
it
designed
helps
to do.
and supports. So that money there helps and supports the recycling industry to, in theory, be able to be a sustainable business model, as well as have money to invest and things like that. Yeah, okay. What EPR, the difference between EPR and PRNs is PRNs, the whole supply chain pays for the taxes, whereas EPR is very much the brand owner pays for the taxes. So the idea is the brand owner has say on what the end packaging format is. So whether it be plastic, tin, card, wooden pallet, whatever it is, they have the say in what it is.
So does that mean, is that going to encourage the end manufacturer to reduce the plastic, make the pack smaller, use the recyclable material, because their tax will be less?
Yes.
Or what they use.
It makes them take ownership.
Right.
Take the tax amount and try and design your packaging around the least amount of tax implications as possible.
Whereas if someone else is paying for it, then you're not too bothered what your pack's made from. But
in
if
theory,
you're being charged,
does that not just drive prices up in the supermarket if the brand owner's responsible?
Yeah. Well, where it gets passed on to is probably another great question, Karl. And to be fair, it's always going to be the citizen that ends up paying for it. Yeah. You pay for it now. We're paying for high energy costs when it comes into manufacturing, which we can talk about a little bit later on how to reduce that. It's all these things. Everything just ends up being factored into inflation or something. The cynic in me, it comes under inflation. So that's what PRNs are against EPR. And then process packaging, because I know Doug wants to answer this one.
Process packaging,
Doug.
Well, that is, as far as I understand it, is all the packaging used within the process of the equipment before it then gets further packed onto the supermarket. So anything within the factory to hold product for a period of time before it's sliced. That is my understanding of that terminology.
100%. It's all the packaging that you don't see on the supermarket shelf that equates to getting that product on the supermarket.
Okay.
And it's a great question because PRNs factor in process packaging. So PRNs is all about how much input you buy. Yeah. So as a factory or as one of our customers, you will buy a certain amount of plastic and you will factor in how much weight you would have factored in there. EPR though, the current indication is, and the big sort of news is EPR is about output. So it's what is on the supermarket shelf. So that prompts the question recently on, well, what about process packaging? So the indication is that process packaging at the moment, the way that they're measuring it, isn't included in EPR. It will be included in plastics tax because that's an input. So that's what you're purchasing. It's about your purchase orders and what your input is. Your output is what hits the supermarket shelf because the way that EPR is working is about the brand. So as soon as your brand is on it, you're responsible for it. So that is about output and on the shelf.
And that's been delayed until January 24.
Yeah.
As
So if
far
you
as
weren't
we
aware,
understand
yeah. And also the other big news this week is that, or not this week, but recently since our last podcast, is that the amounts of different taxes, so non-recyclable, recyclable with 30%, recyclable without 30%, paper, different ones are all changing again. And I imagine they're all going to change within line with inflation or something like that. They haven't quite been defined yet, and I imagine they're going to change again, Clive, to be honest, before they are. But it's a really interesting concept, EPR. What do you think about it, Karl?
Well, I think there's not much difference, really, between that and the PRN. But what I can see is that now, if process packaging isn't included, my mind's just thinking, well, why not?
Yeah.
Why is that not included?
Yeah, it is a great question because it misses a massive chunk.
A massive chunk of plastic.
And as a business, we see a lot of it, right? So a classic one would be bacon backs.
Yep.
So when you're curing a bacon back before slicing, obviously slicing it ends in a coffin pack or a skin pack. But what about the process packaging beforehand?
Before that, yeah. It's always vacuum packed and moved from site to site, and then it's unwrapped, and that just goes in the bin.
Yeah.
It's what's interesting as well from the public point of view is that plastic tax is the story that's really hit the headlines, and I think generally the public are semi-aware of that. EPR has kind of been sneaking away in the background, but it's going to have a far bigger impact on the processor. The bigger, obviously, it's relative to the size of the company, the processor, but
I think unless you're in the industry, you wouldn't really necessarily even know what EPR is.
I see the EPR as the big bad wolf, ultimately, because when you run the numbers, depending on the processor that you're talking about, the numbers are scary.
Are they?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking big numbers. If you're, I'm not going to mention any names, obviously, but if you're a processor that's turning over £1 million in packaging per year, the EPR number is fairly impactful.
And I'll tell you what will make a difference is I get asked all the time from a salesman point of view, how can I reduce the weight of plastic, the size of my packs? Because if you go to the supermarket and you look at the packs on the shelves, the amount of air that's in those packs, that the product's not filling up, or the space around the product that it doesn't need to be there. Now, just with some consultancy, we could look at redesigning their packs. And
100%.
Yes, it's going to cost for new tooling for their packaging machine, but with the cost of the tax saving, could potentially over a period of time save them a fortune.
We're seeing it a lot now,
and
we're ideally set up for it because we can look at both machine and materials together, which is a hell of a luxury for us. But we're seeing it all the time. I mean, some of the numbers are into the hundreds of thousands, just on one line. PT plastics tax, might be 30,000 in this one particular instance. We're seeing 800 grand when EPR comes in. It's huge.
Wow. On top of plastic tax.
And the big thing is you've got to get ahead of it now. I think that's the message that we've got to portray with our consultancy and things as a business. We're really saying to customers, you've got to get ahead of it now.
Get ahead of it,
yeah.
And it's focusing people's attentions.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. All right, question 3, guys. All right, rattling through these.
Yep.
Okay, so this one is another news article that's come out. I found this on LinkedIn, actually. It's by the British Plastics Federation. So their article was, they've done some research, and that 61 million tons of CO2 is saved a year by using plastic packaging in food. So that's 61 million tons of CO2 is saved by using plastic to wrap food.
And how have they come up with this figure?
Well, that's a really good, interesting point. We'll come on to that in a minute for sure. But the question is, okay, that I'm sure a lot of people have when they see these things. It's done by the British Plastic Federation, so you can instantly become cynical that they want to be pro-plastic, right? So is this greenwashing or is this fact? So the question is this article greenwashing or is it fact? So where did they come up with the number? So it'll be done on a life cycle analysis. The question is, where did that life cycle analysis start and end? Because you can always manipulate the numbers.
Yeah, sure.
100%. But I think the poignant part of this is that clearly plastic has a huge part to play in protecting food. Mm-hmm. There's just Karl and Doug, and I want to really explore this for a second because greenwashing is a huge part of the problem. Is plastics really bad? Blue Planet, the poster boy, and that's kind of what this podcast is about today. Plastics is kind of the poster child of sustainability, but really is a lot of it, should it be or should it not be? What is greenwashing, what isn't? So greenwashing, what do you come up with greenwashing?
Well,
what do you see?
When I look at LinkedIn and different social media platforms, the things you see make me want to explode because there is a lot of greenwashing that goes on. Yeah. And you can, touch on the life cycle analysis sort of subject. You can make that read however you want it to read to some extent. You can manipulate the data so it makes your product and your process look really good. Or on the flip side of that, you can make it look really bad if you're trying to, discredit somebody else. So greenwashing is a real difficult one in the industry because there are so many things that go on. Just conscious I just banged the table then. There's so many things that go on in the industry. There was one the other week about a fairly famous bakery producer basically claimed that all of their bread bags were recyclable.
Okay.
Now, we know that not to be true, based on what they were claiming. But it's one of those things. If you go into battle with these people, it makes you look really bad. Sure. Even though they're not being completely honest.
And also, is their statement that it could be recyclable, but in the UK we haven't got the facilities to recycle it?
Yeah.
So is that what they're claiming?
There's
a lot of that as well.
There's
Because
a lot of
LinkedIn
that,
is national, international. There is a lot of that crossover.
Because what you can recycle in Germany, you can't recycle in the UK.
No,
even though the product actually could be recycled, we don't have the infrastructure in the UK to recycle it.
100%.
Exactly right.
And they have different facilities. We have different facilities than them, and we, these often get shipped to different places to get recycled. So there's a lot of it, isn't there?
Yeah.
But then also on your point, you were saying about you can manipulate the data, whether or not you're in the plastics industry and you say cardboard is really bad for the environment and actually the CO2 footprint is terrible for cardboard, just the way that other people within another industry say plastic's really bad for the environment. Now, there probably is an agreement on both are right and both are wrong. You have to be.
It's just all about the angle that you sit in,
and
it's all about perception. And we come back to this PR piece of paper does look better on the shelf because plastic has got such a bad image.
Yes. And
I thought this article is really interesting because it really tries to educate people about plastic and how it is a really valuable resource. And it really is a very good resource. And we know plastic reduces food waste around the world by about 2/3. Yeah. It is a hugely integral part of the food chain industry and our consumption of it. But it's really about how we keep it. From my perspective and from MULTIVAC's perspective, it's how we keep that material. So how do we use it and then how do we reuse it? And that's really where the Plastics Federation comes across, I think, because they're like, this is a really valuable resource, guys. Don't chuck it out. Don't abuse it like we have done for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years when it was created. But know what it's good at and then build on that.
There's a reason why it's used.
Of course.
I mean, it's been engineered over decades to do the job that it does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been overused and it's been abused. I mean, you look at, the obvious examples of fresh produce or produce packs.
Yeah.
Apples don't need to be in plastic. They just don't.
No.
That's why you're seeing a move
Neither
now
do-
to cardboard boxes and this sort of thing.
Great move.
Yeah, which is a really simple thing. But it's just one of those things that over a year, over the years, it's become the norm pretty much. Let's just stick it in plastic.
Yeah, you buy a bag of
Because
carrots.
it's easy.
It's in a plastic bag.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
grow, they've just been taken out the ground. Is there any need for it?
But also, as I said, I genuinely think that it's the food wastage is the thing that is the worst issue that they're dealing with. So at the plant-based conference on Friday I went to, the supermarkets were saying they're going to account for a third of their product that they manufacture is going to be wasted. Now, whether that's wasted in production, whether that's wasted because it goes out of date on the shelves on the supermarket, or whether that's wasted in the consumer's fridge because they don't use it in time. But they account for a third of everything they manufacture will be wasted.
Well, that's the allowance they make for it.
Yeah, that's the allowance they make for it.
That's
So what do you do? What can you do to alleviate those
reduce that.
problems? Yeah, how do you look at your manufacturing practices so you're not wasting it there? How can you look at the packaging types so that you're not wasting it in the supermarkets, or you're giving an extra day or two shelf life to your product?
Yeah, exactly that.
To enabling to reduce
and
the
that's
wastage.
a really important point, and it really comes down to protect the food, and then how do we recycle? So on the back of like Recycling Week, that education piece of plastic's really important. You need to be able to recycle this. An industry is working. We are working very hard to make everything recyclable. It is not quick. It is not fast, but we are doing everything we can. But the consumer's got to be aware of the valuable resource that they're holding, and I think that's really important, especially on Recycling Week. And it's another important point that RAP are trying to tackle greenwashing. So they have sprint groups about defining greenwashing, because it really, really grates. Like Clive and I talk about this a lot, about is that the truth?
Is it the truth?
Or is that just a load of green crap or greenwashing?
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really important.